Welcome in Thursday edition of the program. I hope all of you are having fantastic starts to the day wherever you may be across this great country or this great land. I appreciate all of you spending your time with us. Another wild day. If you thought flipping the calendar from 2020 to 2021 was going to change things, well, it was a wild day. As the fallout from 2020's election continued to play out and implicate people across the spectrum of the country, regardless of how you voted or what you believe. And I talked about this a lot yesterday on my OutKick show. But I think in the broad picture, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm curious what the crew thinks. We have become, in a social media age, so obsessed with letting everybody know all of our emotions all day long, every day, that everything is a perpetual powder keg. And I was thinking about this in the context of sports. What having a phone with the ability to communicate with everyone does to the way we consume sports, does to the way that we think, and everything associated with it. There are some great things about social media, right? Like this idea that anything is 100% bad or 100% good is almost always wrong. But I do think that there's a balancing act in everything. And let me talk about what I mean in terms of emotion and a constant, almost teenage angst that seems to be gripping the country. When you have your phone and you have a Twitter or Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever you've got, and you're watching sports live and you can instantaneously react, that can make social media one of the best sports bars on the planet, right? Because you might be a dad or mom sitting alone at home watching a basketball or football game late at night or during the day or whatever it may be, and something happens and you can immediately react to a game and you can share in that experience. And it can be, oh my God, this is amazing. Oh my God, this is awful. What in the world are people thinking? All of those things, right? Instantaneous emotion can be a good thing because it can spread joy more rapidly. It can spread excitement. All of those factors are big moments, right? But it can also be a situation where everything spreads and it's not in any way helpful or constructive, right? And I guess what I mean by that is there's an analogy out there that I was kind of grappling with, where what social media does is it allows emotion all the time to triumph over logic. And we are being sliced and diced by all of the tech companies in a way that emotion spreads. They make all their money off of emotion as opposed to fact. And whatever you believe in the country, whatever political opinion you have, whatever opinions you have, the internet has a niche to convince you that your opinion is correct. There is an anecdote that supports the idea that your opinion is correct. And so what it does is it leads people further down the rabbit hole, often of absurdity. And that's why on this show, one of the reasons why I think we have dominated and continue to dominate is I keep coming back to what I think is the most integral part of American life. It is the idea that your facts have to be right in order for your opinions to have any legitimacy at all. And what often has happened, I believe, is we have confused facts for opinions. A lot of people can't distinguish between the two. And social media means that we are constantly awash in opinions that a lot of people get confused into believing are facts. And let me give you an example of that. And this is an analogy I've used before, but I just want you to keep it in the back of your mind occasionally and think about it when you are developing what your own opinions might be, right? Tom Brady is about to start the playoffs. And the Bucs are going to go on the road against Washington. Bucs, by the way, around an 8-point favorite in that game. If I came on this morning with you and I said, I don't think Tom Brady and the Bucs are going to win the Super Bowl this year. That's an opinion, right? You listen to this show for a lot of my opinions. And you could be driving around in your car. You could be starting off your morning. You could be like, and I could build on that, right? I could build on that opinion and tell you why I don't believe it's going to happen, right? I don't think Tom Brady and the Bucs are going to win the Super Bowl. I do think they're going to beat Washington this weekend. But then if you look at the NFC playoffs, I don't feel very confident that they're going to go on the road against Green Bay, which would be the most likely opponent that Tampa Bay Buccaneers would have next. I'd like to watch Tom Brady go up against Aaron Rodgers, but I think that'd be a tough game. And then they would have to go on the road, theoretically, against either the Saints or the Seahawks. That's a tough road for Tom Brady to get to the Super Bowl. So I can say pretty easily that's to win 3 games, we know, because they're the 5 seed, the Bucs do, in order to go to the Super Bowl. I can lay that out for you, and you can agree or disagree with that opinion that I just laid out for you. And if you agree with me, some of you are like nodding around in your car right now, like, yeah, you know what? I agree with Clay. I don't think that the Bucs are going to go. And I just laid out my rationale for why I don't think Tom Brady is going to win the Super Bowl or go to the Super Bowl this year. The factual basis upon which I based my argument is realistic, right? Like those different aspects of why I believe that makes sense. Now, if I said to you, I don't believe Tom Brady is going to win the Super Bowl, and then I said, because he's never been to the Super Bowl before in his career, you can agree with my conclusion, but you should trust my opinion less, even though you agree with my conclusion. Because the factual basis upon which I'm relying to reach my conclusion is wrong. Brady has actually been to 9 Super Bowls. He's won 6 before. So if I say he's never been to the Super Bowl, and if I also add in that he's never won the Super Bowl before, you can agree with my conclusion that he's not going to win the Super Bowl this year, but you should trust my opinion less because my facts are wrong that have gotten me to that conclusion. And all too often what I see in this country is people are more concerned with where you end up than how you get there. And what frustrates some people who don't listen carefully to this show is they don't understand that whether you agree or disagree with me, all of my opinions are rooted in factual basis. And the only thing I ever apologize for on this show are when my opinions are rooted in facts that turn out to be incorrect. If I have a misperception, or if I'm misapplying a fact, or if the fact is wrong, then it leads to an opinion that isn't as valid as it otherwise might have been. And one of the things that I think is the biggest flaw that we have in America today is that failure to understand the difference between facts and opinions. Because we can disagree on a variety of different subjects under the sun, sports or otherwise, but our disagreement needs to be founded in a factual basis of reality. Does that make sense? And sports are an interesting metaphor through which we can explore the challenge here. And sports fans kind of know that intuitively, right? If you're a sports fan and you're out at the sports bar and you're having an argument, and I don't mean argument like in the sense where you're both screaming, but just like you're on different sides of an equation. If a guy or girl doesn't have good facts, then you should trust their opinion less. Unfortunately, what we often end up with here is people skip over the logic by which opinions are reached, and they end up only at the conclusion. So this is fascinating in general, the way that this all is breaking down, and you add all of that together with an emotional powder keg, and you end up with situations like happened yesterday at the Capitol. And by the way, the other thing I would say is this. You have to stop assuming, and this is the lawyer in me, you have to stop assuming that anybody is either 100% right or 100% wrong. Because when you believe you're 100% right or someone else is 100% wrong, that's oftentimes when violence ensues. The reality is, even the person that you think you have the least in common with, you probably overlap with a lot of opinions. And so this idea that we have sort of this Disney-fied universe that social media has created, where the latest mob target is the worst human being that's ever existed, it's just flawed, right? The people who were angry about Trump are feeling the same emotions as the people who were angry about protesting back in the summer surrounding all of the social unrest. Right? The emotion is the same. The way that they get there is different, but the emotion is the same. And my position is consistent. Violence during protest is wrong. Right? Period. Whether your violent protest is motivated by right-wing political beliefs, left-wing political beliefs, whatever the reason is, violence during protest is wrong. And it's amazing to me how many people in this country make a living today only criticizing people on one side of an equation and not another. And I'm going to finish with this analogy. And then I'll bring in the crew for a moment here, and then we're going to talk with Frank Isola. When I started doing sports talk radio in the local market of Nashville, where I grew up, one of the things we used to talk a lot about, and I still talk about this a decent amount, is college football, right? In particular, SEC football. SEC football is the most passionate sport in the entire country, in my opinion. The people who are SEC fans care more about their team than anybody cares about any team in all of America. I really 100% believe that, having covered sports all over this country, having gotten to be to just about every sporting event you can imagine. I think the slogan, it means more, really is true. But with that passion can come an inability to get outside of your own biases and outside of your own head. And I want to illustrate this for an example. And this will happen, I think you can apply it to any different sports perspective, but it particularly applies to college football, which always seems to be rife with corruption in general. If one of your rival schools historically was accused of buying a player, breaking NCAA rules, and paying a player, the immediate reaction of any SEC fan was always, of course, insert school here would do that. Like, I grew up a University of Tennessee fan. If Alabama or Florida or Georgia, who are the three biggest rivals of the University of Tennessee really, is accused of buying a player, then for a long time, Tennessee fans would immediately say, oh, of course, that's what Alabama or Florida or Georgia would do, right? Or if one of their players got in trouble, be like, oh, yeah, of course, that's because insert coach here runs a trashy program. And they would want everything possible thrown at that school in terms of a punishment. But if their same school, the school they root for, was accused of the same thing, they would immediately take a step back and they would argue, oh, this isn't really what's at play here. See, there's a difference between what my school did and what that other school did. In other words, they give their side the benefit of the doubt. They presume that their side is not in the wrong, while they believe the other side is 100% in the wrong and that the accusations are accurate and everything associated with that. Well, that difference, using sports as an interesting analogy, that difference represents bias, right? The way you treat somebody that you are predisposed to be in favor of, your favorite team, your favorite political party, your favorite politician, the way you treat and give the benefit of the doubt to that side, and compared to how much you criticize the other side, that's your bias. And so you have to be willing, and this is why I spend so much time talking about precedent and the way that you apply facts and logic and rules to cases. You have to be willing to treat situations the same, whether they involve your favored side or not. And if you can't do that, that is your bias speaking. And we are all predisposed to favor the things that we are on the side of. Sports teams are a perfect analogy because to a large extent, our fandom can blind us to reality. It's why so many Baltimore Raven fans showed up in Ray Rice jerseys right after he knocked out his fiance. Remember, people forget this, but the first practice right after Ray Rice was found to have knocked out his fiance, before the Ravens cut bait with him, before that video came out, we knew what happened. But a bunch of people showed up for the Ravens practice wearing Ray Rice jerseys because he was one of them. He was their guy. They were willing to overlook behavior that if it had been a Pittsburgh Steeler, or if it had been a Cleveland Brown, or if it had been somebody in their division that had done it, they would have never overlooked. That's bias. That's what fandom often is. It's a blind bias in favor of your team, not paying attention to what the actual data or facts are underlying it. And if you're treating Ray Rice, let's say, different than you would treat Ben Roethlisberger or Odell Beckham Jr. in your division, if they had done or been accused of the same thing, that is a bias that you are giving in favor of the guy on, quote unquote, your side. And my argument is we have to spend more time trying to apply consistent standards regardless of who is, quote, on your side or the other. Does that make sense? And that's what I try to do on this show on a daily basis. And I think it's rare in sports media to have somebody who does that, which is why I think this show is dominating compared to most other shows out there in the marketplace. Because intuitively, if you listen for a long enough time, you come to understand that there is a logic and factual basis undergirding my opinions. It doesn't mean you have to agree. But that's why over time, what I hear from people, one of the most consistent things I hear is, when I first started listening to you, I thought, man, this guy's a jerk. This guy is super opinionated. He's cocky. Like whatever insult you want to throw out there. We've been doing this for 5 years now nationwide, and the audience just keeps exploding because the more you listen, the more people are like, oh, wait, there's kind of a logic to what this guy is saying. And there's a foundation upon which his opinions are based, and they make sense logically over time. I'm not one of these hot take artists who comes out one day with one opinion, and then the next week I've got totally a different opinion that isn't rooted in any kind of logical fact. Does that make sense, Danny G? Like trying to, and I think the issue that the country has today is, again, that failure to distinguish between fact and opinion. And it's just running rampant on social media all day long, every day. But I know you have been doing the show for 5 years, and I know you see some of that too. People who said that they initially hated me, they start to listen and they're like, oh, actually, I don't know what's happened to me, but I'm starting to agree. It's like that Alonzo Mourning meme that's out there. I think it's a meme where my kids are experts in memes, not me, where he's like sitting on the bench in his Miami Heat jersey and he starts off shaking his head no. And then by the end, he's starting to shake his head yes. I think there's a great deal of that goes on with listeners every day.
Oh, yeah, and I still see it. Yesterday, I watched part of your OutKick show.
Yeah.
And also, I was looking at a lot of the comments underneath your post about how violence isn't the way to go if you're on either side. And boy, your comments blew up because not everybody agreed with you on that either. Yeah, you were examining social media to start your monologue there, and I think that's a really interesting topic right now because we've talked about Facebook before on the show because of your wife and the experience she had with a family member on Facebook. And I feel the same way about that platform. I rarely go on there. I rarely post anything, but I do check in because I have a lot of family on there, obviously, high school friends, people like that. But, man, yesterday I logged on to my Facebook, and it was an emotional meltdown.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, family members going at it, friends going at it, people I went to school with arguing with each other. I logged off of there, and it's the first time I was, like, happy to see a dumb inspirational quote from an Instagram girl where it was an excuse for her to pose in her
yoga pants,
bikini. A friend of mine right now, she's in Hawaii, and she's just oblivious to everything that was going on yesterday. And she had you can scroll sideways through all the different pictures. She had 10 photos of 10 different bikinis on these beaches in Hawaii with stupid inspirational quotes as an excuse to post the bikini pictures.
Yeah.
And I was so jealous of her. I was like, man, I wish I was on that beach in Hawaii right now, oblivious to everything that's happening. That explains Instagram. And then I go to Twitter, and Twitter obviously is fun, and it's good for what we do in radio because it gives us instant reaction.
And news.
And it's fun for sports too. But it's also a lot of faceless people where you don't exactly know who it might be on the other end. And it could be a blank profile picture or a number in the handle. And so it's a lot of burner accounts and things like that where it's different than Facebook. It's a little different than Instagram. And so you examining and other people with a national platform examining social media and how we use it in our country, I think is a really interesting topic for all of us right now because one thing I started to do recently is I have been unplugging from social media on the weekend.
Yeah.
I check in a couple of times, and it's usually just about sports or whatever with our listeners. But other than that, I'm not posting my life. I'm not posting everything that's going on. I'll maybe just throw one or two posts up and something about a game I'm watching, and that's it. And I unplug, and I don't go to Instagram, and I haven't been going to Facebook at all. And it's so nice just to unplug from it. We are all so hooked on our electronic devices nowadays that you're right. People's emotions on there and the fact that they just want attention. People want attention on there. It's interesting. Obviously, there could be professors teaching classes right now about what is happening in our country with social media.
I just don't think people understand what is occurring with the social media companies. Their entire business model is predicated on emotion because the more emotional you are on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, whatever it may be, the more time you spend on their apps and the more it takes you outside of the real world. Now, I'm in an ironic spot because my business is the media, right? My business is news. My business is opinion. So I have to be, for my job, on Twitter a lot. But you know what? I don't remember the last time that I went to Facebook. I'm on Instagram a very small amount of the time. And if I didn't have my job, I don't think I would spend hardly any time at all on social media because I don't think it's particularly constructive in terms of a way to spend your time. But the big takeaway here in terms of what it's done to sports and politics is it's just created a lot of emotion, and emotion oftentimes is the enemy of logic. And it's also created a world where I don't think it's a coincidence that Trump was the most disliked Republican to ever be nominated in 2016, and Hillary was the most disliked Democrat to ever be nominated in 2016. We nominated, as a country, the two most disliked people to run for president in 2016, which to me is a culmination of the overall social media era. And what ended up happening there is we have moved from, I want to pick somebody that the other side is going to like because it makes them more likely to win an election, to I am going to pick someone that the other side hates, right? The people who are able to provoke a reaction on the other side the most are the people who are the most popular on social media, and therefore it's how they end up getting the nomination. We just don't know, I don't believe, all of the impacts that social media has unleashed, the hurricane that it has sown in our country. And I think we're reaping the whirlwind right now on both sides, the violence from the summer and the violence that we saw yesterday. They're both rooted in the same thing. It's emotion. And emotion is being fueled by social media on a day-to-day basis. Just want you to think about it and be cognizant of it, especially that difference between facts and opinion.